So first, let me echo Patricia and one more thank you for our evening sponsor tonight, the great companies and their leaders who play such an important roles at this dinner and in our industry. So to Hecla Mining, Hatch, Barrick, Franco-Nevada, Goldcorp, Magri, SNC Lavalin, Agnico Eagle, BMO Capital, Tech and Paradigm Capital, thank you very much. Let's now turn to the inductions into our Hall of Fame. Our first inductee this evening is the late Keith Brimacombe, a leading metallurgist and academic whose breakthroughs allowed the material industry to produce higher quality products at lower costs. Please sit back and enjoy this short video on Keith's life.
Keith Brimacombe left an indelible impact on the University of British Columbia, the people he mentored, and the industry he studied.
He was, I would say, a visionary, a pioneer, an incredible ability to understand how to connect very disparate pieces of information to provide insight that nobody had actually thought about.
Keith was a little bit unique as a visionary, as he actually looked at the ground we were standing on. He worked with existing industries, he worked with existing technologies, and it was all about improving our understanding of those technologies.
Where some researchers would be happy making a major contribution in one area, Keith Brimacombe was dedicated to researching many ferrous and non-ferrous processes.
The remarkable thing is the areas I worked on with him were 2 of probably 10 areas that he was working on simultaneously. Just a remarkable intellect and capability.
Many of the improvements and advances made by Keith involved processes key to the mining industry, like his work with zinc fuming and the Pierce-Smith converter. It was his approach to studying these areas that made him unique.
No one in the world had ever done that until he came along and really demonstrated how you could do it most effectively.
Probably his biggest contribution is in the computer modeling of continuous casting processes. And by doing that, he really greatly enhanced our understanding of how that process operates.
Keith developed working relationships with and obtained support from many of the industry's major companies.
What was unique about Keith is that he was willing to go into industry, make measurements, and try and understand how this process operated in fundamental ways.
He was an advocate of building pilot scale models for research at the university and of bringing various disciplines together to solve problems. The Brimacombe building at the University of British Columbia is a working example of that vision.
Keith's legacy at the University of British Columbia and perhaps around the world were the people he mentored. There's no question. I think he probably has close to 80 graduate students that were educated by him, and many of us have gone on to have very successful careers.
When I first got a chapter back from Keith, back in the day, he would edit with a red pen, and it literally looked like it was covered in blood. I used to call it the bloodletting exercise. He felt that it was really important to spend a lot of time with you in writing that document and getting that document as good as it could be to best pull out the ideas that came out of that work that you put into it.
One thing about Keith that you knew when you talked to him was he was deeply interested in you as a person and cared deeply about your intellect, your intellectual growth, as well as your personal life. I have to say that without his mentorship, in what was largely a male-dominated field, there is no question I would never be the person that I became. Keith was remarkable because he had this incredible amount of energy. He worked unbelievable hours. I mean, his family will tell you that he probably woke up at 4 or 5 in the morning and he'd be working till 10 or 11 at night. And he kept really long hours.
Often called an ambassador for the mining industry, Keith accomplished a lot in a short time. He held over 100 positions in more than 30 industry, educational, and government associations and committees. He also taught over 50 courses in companies around the world.
You could travel the world, literally, and you'd bump into people that knew Keith either in person or by virtue of the impact he'd had on a particular field. So it was quite incredible.
He also authored 10 books, published almost 300 papers, and obtained 15 patents. Keith received over 28 major national and international awards. He was instrumental in obtaining several $1 million in research funding. In 1985, he established the Center for Metallurgical Process Engineering. In 1997, Keith took a leave of absence from UBC to become the founding CEO and president of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, a government initiative to foster world-class research in Canada. Keith died young, suffering a fatal heart attack at age 54. He was born in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and raised in Rosalind, Alberta, where he developed a passion for knowing how things worked. Keith went on to gain world recognition and accomplish more than most could in several lifetimes. At UBC, he developed a culture of working with industry that is still embraced by students today.
They pick up on that culture. They recognize the importance of that culture and how it's made the people that have adopted it successful.
That is incredible. Almost 20 years has passed since he was doing research, and yet his influence is profound. And I think these two legacies, the transformation that he effected on the steel industry and also in metallurgical process engineering, I think are unparalleled in terms of a contribution.
Patricia Dillon will present the award to Keith's sister, Judy. So please, would Patricia and Judy come to the podium?
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Director and Chair of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, it is my distinct honor to induct Keith Brimacombe into the Hall in recognition of his amazing career. We are very pleased that Keith's sister, Judy, has come here all the way from California, and the weather hasn't been too bad, fortunately, for you, and to accept this award on behalf of her brother. Thank you, Judy.
Good evening. Sorry, that film was so beautifully done. I'll have to spend a few minutes here. As Pat said, my name is Judy Brimacombe, and I'm the younger sister of James Keith Brimacombe. And on behalf of Keith's daughters, Catherine and Jane, Keith's wife, Meg, Keith's mother, who's still alive, Mary Jean Scullion, Keith's living brothers, Neil and Dan, his sister, Margaret, and Keith's extended family in Canada, the United States, and Australia, it is truly my honor to be here tonight to accept this award on behalf of Keith. Keith was a very accomplished academic in the field of metallurgical engineering and metals processing. His contributions to the field earned him an international reputation and following. When Keith left us too soon in December 1997, we were comforted by the outpouring of love and support that we received from the international metallurgical societies and community. It was truly humbling and yet very comforting to read the faxes that poured in from around the world, sharing with us how Keith had affected the lives of others. Keith was a remarkable professional, but he was an equally remarkable son, father, brother, colleague, and friend. Some of my earliest memories of Keith some of my earliest memories do involve Keith and his kindness towards me, his younger sister, and how much interest he took in me and my well-being as a very young boy. Keith believed in all people, no matter their circumstances in their lives. He was blind to gender, social status, and ethnicity. Christmas at Keith's was always, most often included a graduate student or two from a foreign country who couldn't make it home to spend time with their own families, so Keith welcomed them into his family. Keith encouraged women at a time when it was not so commonplace. I recall him speaking so earnestly about the accomplishments and intellect of Indira, who you just saw, long before she completed her graduate program at UBC. As a young woman of 17, I was wondering if I should go off to college and spoke with Keith about it, and his immediate reaction was, "Of course you're going to college." Keith always encouraged us and looked out for us. Keith's oldest daughter, Catherine, shares the following. Dad inspired Jane and me to do our best in everything. He believed we could achieve anything we put our minds to if we worked hard. Dad inspired us to reach for the stars. He embodied ambition, and he was our role model. Dad believed in the goodness of all people. He truly cared about people. He wanted to make a contribution to humanity. He wanted to do his part to make a difference in the global community, which he did through his work. And if I might also add, which he did through the legacy he left behind with his daughters, his family, and the many colleagues who loved him and miss him still. On behalf of Keith and his family, thank you so much for this amazing honor.
Many thanks, Judy and Patricia. Our next video honors the late Harold Hank Williams, geologist and plate tectonic superstar. Let's learn more by watching this video.
Hank Williams' legacy as a geoscientist is as enduring as the rocks he studied.
He had a sense of purpose. He knew what he was trying to accomplish, and he put himself through a tremendous amount of sacrifice and dedication to achieve the knowledge that he managed to put together. And he was internationally respected for particularly his work on the Appalachian.
Hank began his work with the Geological Survey of Canada, publishing landmark papers in 1964 and 1967 while mapping the Appalachian Mountain Belt. His seminal work was a map of the Appalachians from Alabama to Newfoundland and Labrador, published in 1978.
He synthesized the entire belt, and he put rocks, instead of in unit A, B, and C, they were put together in terms of the ancient tectonic environments that they formed in. I think it was the first time that tectonics was applied to an ancient mountain belt, and it allowed us to be predictive about where certain rock types would occur elsewhere in the mountain belt. His map allowed people to look at that mountain belt in a tectonic framework, which was pretty unheard of at the time. It created and it helped spawn the concept of what we call regional metallogeny, which is effectively how do mineral deposits fit within the evolution of mountain belts.
Hank's breakthroughs came from his ability to think of the big picture rather than focusing on a small scale.
So this was the first map that took all the various parts of the mountain belt and broke it into what we call tectonostratigraphic zones.
The thinking from the more than 300 articles and maps he authored or co-authored is still used on a day-to-day basis in exploration to help find deposits. Several mineral deposits have been found in the area, covered by Hank's map. Hank was born on the very rock that would become the natural laboratory for his work. A proud Newfoundlander, Hank was the first person to graduate with a geology degree from Memorial University of Newfoundland in 1956. He earned his master's in 1958, again from Memorial University, and his PhD at the University of Toronto in 1961. His thesis took him to the Chisel Lake area of Manitoba. The results were published as maps with the Geological Survey of Canada and the Canadian Mining Journal. In 1968, Hank moved back to St. John's to start a career in academia back at Memorial University, starting as an associate professor and retiring as a professor in 1999. Hank's knack for being able to take complex information and present it in a way that his students and the public could understand made him a great educator. He was known for his legendary field trips across Newfoundland.
We have all this high technology, geochemistry, geophysics, etc., but it really starts with the rocks, and Hank influenced generations of people to look at the rocks first and then build successive layers of information on top of it. And I think that that's sort of probably the greatest educational legacy that he could leave.
Hank was also passionate about getting his message out to the public. He was well known for his entertaining talks that combined his love of geology with his love of music.
Hank would give his talk on mountain belts, but then afterwards would take out a nose whistle and teach the kids how to play music and so on. He loved what he did, and it was really clear when he gave public lectures how much he loved what he did for his career.
Hank's passion for communicating his work to the public inspired prominent Newfoundland businessman Paul Johnson to create the Johnson Geo Center. The center is a showcase for the work of both Hank Williams and Dr. Arthur King, whose research focused on the 500-million-year-old rocks of Signal Hill.
I guess between Mose Morgan and Hank, they both managed to impress upon a poor businessman the fact that there was a huge story to be told, and you couldn't do it by writing a book, or you couldn't do it in any other way but to create exhibits and to build an institution that people could come to and absorb all the information that had been brought together.
The center on Signal Hill in St. John's is built partially underground. The award-winning center hosts about 50,000 visitors a year. It also has a curriculum-based program for grades 2 to 12 that serves 46,000 children. Hank's map hangs prominently in the Geo Center, a reminder of the man who changed the way the world looks at rocks.
I think he was driven as a scientist. That was his passion, but he was also driven to communicate that passion.
He knew what he was trying to prove, and nothing stopped him from trying to document and establish exactly what he thought was the truth. You couldn't help but respect him for that.
Hank's legacy lives on through everyone that visits the Geo Center. Through the geologists and geoscientists being educated at Memorial University, and by the explorationists to this day, using his thinking to find new deposits.
Unfortunately, due to a normal weather disturbance over Newfoundland, 140-kilometer wind, 5 feet of snow, several of Hank's friends and colleagues from St. John's were unable to be here tonight. So Hank is represented by Peter Dimmel, president of Crenor Resources and Mineral Exploration Consultant, and the award will be presented by Canadian Mining Hall of Fame Director Anthony Vaccaro, the publisher of the Northern Miner. So Peter and Anthony, please would you come to the podium?
First of all, a word on the video you've all just seen. Shortly after being interviewed for the video last fall, Paul Johnson passed away peacefully in his home in St. John's. So we'd just all like to extend our sympathy to the family and the friends of Paul's. He was a very generous, modest benefactor, and we appreciate the words that get to live on through the video that we all just seen. Now turning to another proud Newfoundlander. I'm very pleased to mark Hank Williams' induction into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame by presenting the award to Peter Dimmel. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lassonde, Mr. Vaccaro, it is truly an honor and a privilege to be here tonight to accept Harold, better known as Hank, Williams' induction into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, class of 2016. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Williams family and Memorial University of Newfoundland, where Hank was a professor for 31 years. The head of the Department of Earth Science at Memorial University, Dr. John Hanchar, was supposed to be here tonight for this induction. However, his flight was canceled because of snow and high winds in St. John's, as Pierre just mentioned. Also scheduled to be here tonight, but whose flights were canceled, was Dr. Stephen Piercy, who you saw prominently on the video, and Frank Blackwood, who, along with myself, championed the nomination of Hank's induction into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. Well, they say you don't move to Newfoundland for the weather, and that's the truth. Luckily, we came in last night. Hank is best remembered for his pioneering work in synthesizing the geologic evolution of the Appalachian mountain chain, which extends from Alabama to Newfoundland. Well, we like to say Newfoundland to Alabama, which led to his seminal tectonic lithofacies map of the Appalachian origin, which you saw in the video, published in 1978. Just as an aside, apparently there's been 10,000-ish copies of that map that have been bought worldwide. 10,000 maps, 10,000 copies of one map. That's a lot. Hank's numerous contributions to the field of geoscience have provided us with a much better understanding of the plate tectonics and the relationships between the different geologic terrains throughout the Appalachians. This in turn has allowed geologists to more strategically focus their search for new mineral deposits in the Appalachians in North America and their equivalents on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and has also contributed to the recognition and synthesis of plate tectonics and their importance in mineral exploration worldwide. Before I leave, I want to tell you a very brief story about Hank. Hank was giving John Dewey, another international leader in the development of plate tectonic theory, a personal guided tour across the Appalachian origin in Newfoundland back in the late 60s or early 70s. John was very impressed with the magnificent exposures of the vestiges of the Proto-Atlantic Ocean, known as Iapetus, in central Newfoundland on what was a very hot and sunny summer day. He was surprised when Hank stopped in the middle of a bridge across one of the island's many rivers. They got out of their vehicle and walked to the railing, where Hank proceeded to haul up a line tied to the rail. At the end of the rope was a six-pack of beer that Hank had positioned earlier on the river bottom so that they could enjoy a cool one during the day's rock hopping. Dr. Dewey knew then that his confrere's genius extended to more than geology. For those of you that know Newfoundland, this is not unusual. Although you won't find beer under every bridge, as you may have heard, Newfoundlanders are known to enjoy a swally from time to time. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
That is one of the great mystery of life, is what is it about Newfoundland that, Newfoundlanders always go back to Newfoundland? I've been there many times, but it's like, bonds. I've never quite understood either one of them. But one day, it's not without hope, I'm told. So now we're in store for another treat, a really a great story about one of my favorite geologists, diamond finder and philanthropist, Stewart Blossom. Here's the video.
Essentially in the center of the oldest piece of crust that we know in Canada, the Slave Province. And you can, considering that what we found from this one site here, you got to think of this as downtown diamond country.
When Stu Blusson describes his life, it seems his journey to finding diamonds in Canada was predestined. His reverence for nature, passion for flying, and talent for mapping all led him down a path that resulted in the creation of a multi-billion-dollar industry in Canada's north. Stu Blusson was born in Vancouver in 1938 and moved to Powell River when he was in grade 7. As a teenager, his love of the outdoors had him working at a hunting and fishing lodge, where he met a prospector.
Well, he told me about a prospecting course that winter. Before I went to college, my brother and I took it. It was put on by the Chamber of Mines. And that hooked me on studying rocks.
In 1957, Stu got a job with the BC Forest Service, where he learned how to study aerial photos.
I could spot an individual tree in the forest and figure out what distance I had to chain in to get to that tree or something, so we could get to that tree, even in a forest setting. We imagine how powerful that is as a means of locating yourself.
Following his graduation from UBC in honors geology, he received his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. In California, he also learned to fly fixed-wing aircraft. Next, Stu joined the Geological Survey of Canada and honed his skills, mapping the Yukon and Northwest Territories.
He's a great mapper. He's a great observer. He's a super observer. He's the best mapper I think I've ever seen. He saw things and was able to follow things that very few people saw.
Dirk says the first conversations about finding diamonds in Canada surfaced in 1969, when he, Stu Blusson, and Chuck Fipke sat around a campfire while working for the Geological Survey of Canada.
I mean, he had that commitment, and he never wavered. You know, that's what people who hunt for minerals are all about, having that commitment and believing that it's there, or knowing that it's there when everybody else knows it's not.
Why wouldn't Canada have diamonds? I mean, it just makes obvious geologic sense that it would.
Stu and Chuck weren't the only ones looking for diamonds in the Northwest Territories. Rocks containing indicator minerals had caught the attention of prominent diamond producer De Beers.
We started sampling the area that we had a prospecting permit on, which was essentially tied on to De Beers but went into older rocks. And that's when I realized that, well, we're out to lunch too.
This is when Stu's expertise in mapping gained at the Geological Survey of Canada came into play. He spent a summer going over maps and realized that the rocks in the glacial eskers that carried diamond indicator minerals had originated from bedrock 500 kilometers to the east near Lac de Gras. It was also the unique method they used to hunt for the diamonds that made them successful.
Our sampling technique was to use a float plane and concentrate on beaches where the esker system, where you can see an esker coming through here and the beach coming off it.
Stu and Chuck discovered the largest kimberlite field in North America, in the Lac de Gras region of the Northwest Territories.
But we could find pipes really quickly. In fact, one afternoon, I think Chuck and I found 17. Imagine that. Because you see, you could actually visually see them. I'm flying the helicopter and Chuck's recording on the map where they are, and I'm pointing out, well, look at Chuck over there. How about this? Look at over there. How about that one?
Just about 10 kilometers from that site now sits the Ekati mine, which opened in 1998. It was operated through a joint venture with BHP Billiton, arranged by Hugo Dummett. It was Hugo who helped Stu and Chuck realize that one of the keys to finding diamonds was the quality of the indicator minerals. A production milestone of 50 million carats was reached in 2011. The Ekati mine is now owned by Dominion Diamonds. Future development of the new J Pit has the potential to extend the mine life into 2030.
It wasn't all easy, and it wasn't all like fell into their laps. There was a lot of tough times.
So 86 and 87, we didn't grow. We had no funding to grow. We had a 22% second mortgage on our house in Vancouver. And so even to scrape together $6,000 for us this season would have been tricky, because by this time our impatient private investors were kind of, like thinking twice about continuing.
Their key sample taken in 1985 wasn't evaluated until 1988. It sat in a garage until they had enough funding to test it. They ended up staking claims to almost 1 million acres and kicking off a staking rush in the north that saw various companies tie up 20 million acres. Their find spawned a multi-billion-dollar diamond industry in Canada, making it the world's third largest producer of diamonds. For Stu, a life outdoors was a life filled with adventure.
With Stu, fieldwork was never routine or dull or boring. There was always adventures. There was always stuff that wasn't really planned that we had to react to or whatever.
On one occasion, the helicopter Stu was traveling in crashed shortly after dropping off Dirk.
I could hear them flying away, and I could hear them circling an area not very, very far away, and then suddenly I didn't hear it anymore.
I was on the left side when we went in, and the other side was mangled by the blade and transmission that came right through the cabin.
Life on the ground was just as exciting, with wildlife encounters, like coming face to face with a lynx and surviving a bear attack.
And this strange sound, and I look around just around this outcropping, and it was a bear chewing snow. Can you imagine? How would you ever know what that sounds like? The snow was falling out of his mouth. He turned around and looked at me with stuff, and then he just leaped. As soon as he saw me, he just rushed right at me. Anyway, I managed to sidestep out, jump out of the way, but he came back up the slope and took a swipe at me and got my arm.
Like most prospectors, for Stu, it's not as much about the money, but about the thrill of the find.
He's obviously extremely intelligent, and I think he likes challenges, and whether the challenge is finding a new mine or finding some new geologic concept or proving some geologic theory or exploration technique or whatever, I think that's what drives him most.
Stu's success has allowed him to share his wealth. He has contributed to and obtained matching grants that total almost $500 million. At 77, Stu Blusson is just as enthusiastic about his diamond project as the day it was discovered, is still flying helicopters, and is still as happy to be out in the field as when he was a young boy who loved the outdoors.
Here to present the award to our own revenant. I mean, he's a bit older than Leonardo DiCaprio, but he certainly has a heck of a life, is Hall of Fame director and first vice president of the PDC, Bob Schaefer. So Stu, please, and Bob, please.
Wow, isn't that geology stuff great? Holy cow. Ladies, you got to appreciate geology a whole lot more knowing this guy. And it's my really very distinguished privilege to present you one of this evening's honorees, Stu Blossom. As you saw in the video, Stu is an exceptionally talented, very modest, very generous geologist and prospector who's not hesitated to share his success with some very worthy causes as well. By bringing Stu into the Hall of Fame, we've at last united that very determined and storied trio that believed that diamonds could be discovered in the north of Canada and that a new substantial business industry could be established there as well. Please welcome one of Canada's diamond industry pioneers, Dr. Stu Blossom.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the head table. And I must say, I'm really overwhelmed and humbled by this great honor into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, which really is incomparable because, let's face it, we know this group of mining people in this country is unmatched by anyone, so doesn't that make you the Hall of Fame, a worldly Hall of Fame? And your remarks... and Bob, thank you. Those remarks about being united, I was going to mention that myself. Something that means a great deal to me is being associated with all these the greatest people in mining that we've ever seen. Along with that association, it means that to me that the late Hugo Dummett and Chuck and I are again united. And I would say that touches me a great deal. There's other members here that I wish to, and all those who helped in this process of the nomination and review. Two people that, particularly that I wish to mention that directly contacted me were Ed Thompson and Rob Boyd, who's sitting right over here. And the other thing I would like to end to Mike Maslowski, the nominator, who couldn't be here tonight. He's the incredible mine finder from the Flin Flon area, the complete mine finder who found more mines probably than anybody. And unfortunately, he, as I say, he couldn't make it tonight. And I want to thank all of you for being here as well, and on behalf of all the other inductees for your part in the recognition and helping us celebrate this very unusual and special event. To all those who wrote letters of support for me, all I can really say is I just can't thank you enough. It was very difficult getting through some of them, going through, bringing up the memories that go way back to times when we'd cross paths, I guess, in the field and whatnot, various people. In particular, those that in the mining field that I knew. Without those letters, I would never have known what some of the comments and suggestions I made to them over the years meant to them and how it affected what they did in their own exploration programs. And that was, I must say, most touching to me. It was really a big part of this inauguration process to the Hall of Fame. The other thing I want to point out is that in our group here, a number of distinguished people are with us at our three tables we have, and a few I'd like to acknowledge as well. In particular, Blake Bromley, the worldly recognized expert in charity that introduced us to a whole new group of people, top-notch, distinguished, high achievers in both the research and education fields. And there's two representatives in particular I'd like to mention here tonight. And this is the one that you all probably know, I'm sure, the all-Canadian hero and also a Hall of Famer in his own field, sport, the incomparable Rick Hansen, sitting right over here. And as well, we have a very distinguished educator and researcher in his own right, worldly known in legal law. He is also one who put the UBC research efforts firmly on the world stage, and that's Dr. and Professor Stephen Toop.
from UBC. But as you know, I had an amazing career with the Geological Survey, as Hank Williams did. In fact, I knew Hank in Ottawa. We shared a temporary building together and away from the headquarters, so to speak, which gave us much more freedom, which both of us enjoyed. And we came and went as we pleased, and you saw him with his banjo. I spent numerous days with him in various places with his banjo, and of course, we never missed a St. Patrick's party. He was a great one for that. So we could sneak off anytime we wanted and come to work anytime we wanted, whereas you couldn't do that, of course, at the main building. But it's funny, at that time, it was a critical time in geology. As you know, we all know about it now, the plate tectonics and continental drift, but that was resisted by the earliest professors that we had. And it was in that transition period. For me, it was when I was at Berkeley, and for him, when he was a few years older, when he started his career, when it was just coming together. And in those discussions, which affects parts of the world that are affected on the edges of the continents, like back east and out west, we collaborated a lot on some of the thinking that was going on at the time. So that was a big part of my life, spending those years with Hank before he went back to Memorial University. And one of the things I should point out is that the picture you saw with me in the funny hat on top of the mountain in the snow, that was a little bit out of context. That was my first summer with the Geological Survey up in the Yukon. I didn't meet Chuck until 10 years later. But that was right on one of the major sutures in the continent, talking about plate tectonics and movements. That was on the Tintina Trench. I hadn't even graduated yet. In fact, studying that, the geology up there with the fellow that took the picture, who was one of the first thinkers in continental drift, Jim Roddick. It was a privilege for me as a student to be sharing a tent like that. And, you know, in snowstorms of sorts, all you do is talk about geology or whatever, but he was the first person that ever pointed out to me that we're not going to really know much about geology until we study the oceans. This was in '59. And he was even thinking then about all the features that are relevant to that. You know, you've got to find what the plates are, you know, even suggested plates, and of course we knew about the ice line, what was going down the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, but not elsewhere.
Stu, could we move to the 70s?
Sorry. Oh, okay. All right, yeah. All right. All right, well, anyway, you're going to say this. The GSC, what I'm saying is that the Geological Survey really should have a lot of credit for me being here. There's no better place to actually be mentored in geology than that. It was like whatever you learn in college, you could double it in the field with the people that we work with. Anyways, my whole life really has been one of fraught with danger, I would say. Starting when I was a kid, logging camps are unregulated and climbing spar trees and everything else. But it was through the survey years, though, that there was so much risk with helicopters because these were the golden years. These are the years in which 200 years of projected work was condensed into 15. And Hank and I were both part of that. And particularly in my case, there was field parties all over the north. And this one helicopter crash that they mentioned, it was unsurvivable by any measure. And yet the pilot and I weren't even hurt. But if Derek, you saw in the picture, was riding in the other seat, just minutes before we dropped him off, he would have been killed for sure because the whole side of that helicopter was gone. And those are the kind of things that do change your life. Well, we ended the party. That was it. And by the way, I had just met Chuck about a week before, and we'd set him up on a hilltop using that same machine, which turned out to have this major design flaw. And because of that aircraft
was grounded for good at that point. And in fact, the picture you saw of a helicopter, there's one picture with a long pilot, a tall pilot standing beside it. That belonged to another major mining legend, Don McLeod. That was his helicopter. That was the same helicopter and the same pilot. You're talking about a small world we live in. Eh? Well, even again, to show the connection we have in this world, after the helicopter crash, which I contend I was born again, no question about it. No, really, it had to be. It didn't end my survey career, but what it did do.
What year are we now?
No, but what it did do, it started me on my own plank.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
We're gonna have to wrap this up.
Oh, okay. All right. But one story must tell. We all have bear stories, of course, but the biggest, but the most important thing probably that ever happened to me up north, the most endearing thing, and that's what caused the shift from my career with the survey into exploration, was I met my beloved Marilyn, sitting right over there. Well, you imagine, 4-month summers are not out of the question. My living costs soared, even though Marilyn was making more than I was. And so it was time to move on.
Yeah, she was flying.
And shortly after, I met, linked up with Hugo and Chuck. And so when you think about it, everything that came after, for everything that came after, all of us here, including Canada itself, we owe a major debt of gratitude to that beautiful lady sitting over there.
All right, you're done.
That's fine. That's right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Stewart Blossom. I mean, he's so entertaining. We could have been here all night, you know. Our next inductee is a very dear friend of mine, and please watch the video for Luigi Niac.
Brilliant, disciplined, committed, intelligent, innovative, passionate, fair. These are just a few of the words people use to describe Luigi Niac.
Well, Louis is a great motivator, a great leader, someone we looked up to, someone that challenged us, someone that made sure we developed well and had the opportunity to face great challenges.
So this is the aerial view of Marianne as it now stands. This is where the plant site here. The power plant is right here. The grinding circuit is here.
Louis Gignac is known as one of the great mine builders and operators in Quebec, Canada, and internationally. He's been involved in building 15 mines in Canada and 6 worldwide. Born in Sherbrooke, Quebec, and growing up in the eastern townships, Louis had 2 career choices, farming or mining. He says mining was an easy choice.
On the mining side, I mean, it was half the work and twice the pay, so it became somewhat more interesting going forward. But more importantly, I was looking for adventure. I mean, having had a life pretty much focused on a farm for a long period of time, I wanted to see the rest of the world, and I think I pretty much achieved that.
Louis spent his summers working at various mines as he finished school, obtaining bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees in mining engineering at Laval University, the University of Minnesota, and the University of Missouri-Rolla. He also taught at Laval University while writing his thesis. In 1986, Louis was asked to take on the task of transitioning the Quebec government's mining assets into a public company. He oversaw a successful $157.5 million IPO for Camior. Under his direction as CEO, The company increased production from 50,000 ounces of gold per year to more than 700,000 in 2004. In total, the company produced about 10 million ounces of gold in 20 years. After great success with home-based projects, Cambior spread its wings internationally with the Omai project in Guyana, a project many large international mining companies thought too challenging to tackle.
So here we go, as green as could be, get to Guyana and head to the project. And I think for the 3 days we were there, I mean, it was continuous rain and I mean, downpours. So you can imagine us going up on boats up the Essequibo River being drenched, I mean, totally wet. And I think we were wet continuously for those 3 days.
In a country that lacked even the basic infrastructure, physical infrastructure, it was extremely challenging. I believe Omai was built with one fax machine. How you actually construct a mine, I mean, it's beyond what people can even fathom today.
Under Louis' leadership, Cambior went on to develop the equally challenging Rosabelle project in Suriname. Rosabelle is treating 12 million tons of ore a year with a gold grade of only 0.8 grams per ton to recover 300,000 ounces of gold. It wasn't all smooth sailing for Louis.
We had our cases of operational issues, we had our financial crisis, but all the way through, Louis was always there to stand up and continue the process and respond to the challenges. And I think that's why I have a tremendous amount of respect for the man.
Louis distinguished himself as a great leader when crisis hit, always leading from the front. A tailings dam failure at Omai was a real test of character.
Instead of, running away from the fire, everybody headed straight to the fire. That's the kind of person Louis is. And that's why people 20 years later are saying, I want to be part of the next one, because they know the right thing is going to be done and it's going to get resolved.
When the price of gold dropped in the 1990s, the company faced a financial crisis. Louis took Cambior through a financial restructuring that saw the company not only survive, but thrive. In 2006, they struck a deal with IAMGOLD that valued Cambior at $1.3 billion. Another great testament to Louis' leadership skills is the number of people he has mentored who have gone on to senior roles in the industry.
Sometimes he's like a professor. He has a huge amount of knowledge.
I certainly would not have achieved what I've done in my career without having the benefit of Louis' insights and training and mentorship and being challenged by him also. And I think a lot of my colleagues would share that same thought.
Louis isn't done yet. After his time at Cambior, Louis created a thriving mining consulting company called G Mining Services, where he still works alongside his 3 sons building new mines like Newmont's Marion project in Suriname and IAMGOLD's Essakane project in Burkina Faso.
I would say he demands a lot from himself. He's a very intelligent man. He also is very passionate, very fair, and wants to succeed, wants to win.
It's the thrill of, again, going from oftentimes is nothing, no infrastructure, to a very modern industrial complex, generating wealth for everybody, shareholders, investors, but also local population.
And managing that entire process requires a unique individual.
Louis is proud of all the projects he has worked on, but in the end, he says it is always about the people.
In one's career, you can never plan on a straight path. I mean, you got to roll with the punches and seize the opportunities when they present themselves. But at the end, I think the great lesson is you're not going to make it by yourself. You do need mentors, but you also need a lot of good partners to make it.
Here to present the award to Louis is Pierre Gratton, a Hall of Fame Director and CEO of the Mining Association of Canada. Would you please come to the podium?
Good evening. It gives me tremendous honor and pleasure. C'est un grand honneur et plaisir pour moi to mark Louis' induction into the Hall of Fame by presenting him with this award. As a past chair of the Mining Association of Canada, et comme membre de l'Association minière du Québec, who nominated him, Louis has always been a strong voice for mining and a supporter of the work of our associations. Louis.
Thanks, Pierre. Members of the Table of Honor, ladies and gentlemen, it's an immense pleasure for me to be here and be inducted in the Hall of Fame. I was informed early on that I would have about 4 to 5 minutes to address you, and now, being between Stu and Bob Friedland, I know why. It was totally unexpected and somewhat emotional when Brian Coates informed me that many ex-Cambior co-workers and business partners had prepared an application proposing me for consideration to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. It was a surprise because I certainly did not make life easy for them for a long time, and it proves that my memory is a lot better than theirs. When I started in this business, one of the first mine I worked at was the Brunswick No. 12 mine, which was part of the Noranda group at the time. And I was trying, as a young project engineer and shift boss, trying not to screw up too bad, even though it was somewhat difficult. There's an old mine captain that took me under his wing, a guy that had worked at the Horn mine and the Quemont mine, and obviously was finishing his career at number 12. And he explained to me that in the mining business, the hardest thing is to be known as a tough son of a bitch. Once you're a known son of a bitch, you got it made. So that's a guideline that I've applied for most of my career subsequent to there. Anyway, permettez-moi de me remercier Brian Coates et tous les supporters de Cambior et autres pour avoir instigé ce grand honneur pour moi. Nous avons rencontré de grands défis au cours des années et j'ai toujours pu compter sur votre support complet et constant. Je prends énormément de plaisir à suivre vos progrès et succès en dépit des nombreux imprévus et la nature cyclique de notre industrie. It is a huge honor for me to join some of the inductees in the Hall of Fame that I had relationships with throughout during my career, and for whom I've developed great respect over the years. And just to name a few, guys like Bill James, Norm Keevil, Bob Smith, Pierre Lassonde, Graham Farquharson, Bill Brissenden, Bob Albauer, and many others. Recently, I've received many congratulation messages following the news of my election, pending election to the Hall of Fame. A recent positive one said, "Congratulations for this Hall of Fame thing, but don't let it go to your head." And a few days ago, I was in Suriname on the Marion project for Newmont, and I was doing my walkabout, and one of the Surinamese workers came to me and said, "We have heard that you're going to be put in a museum." So obviously, there was a bit of distortion in the translation. I want to share this honor with a great number of people, very likely thousands, who trained me, coached me, helped me grow, again, from student miner to project engineer to shift boss to superintendent to mine manager and eventually CEO. I also, since when I became CEO of Cambior, I need to thank all those brave souls who accepted to meet all the challenges that I got them into over the years, and had faith that we would prevail and come out winners, but also very exhausted. There's no bigger thrill for a miner to plan, build, and start production at new mines. And I'm very happy to still have the opportunity to do it, even though for now it's more for the sport than anything else. Finally, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have the opportunities, challenges, and successes in my career without the support and grounding from my partner of 42 years, this girl from South Dakota named Brenda, who not only accepted to live in most of the mining towns in Eastern Canada for the first 20 years of my career, but also thrived in it. After all the trips that I took me away from home for several weeks at a time, she was always welcoming me with, "How were your vacations there?" I eventually learned that raising 5 kids, including 4 boys in a row, made whatever I did look like vacation. Bren, thank you. And yes, eventually, sooner or later, I will retire. Thank you.
Fabulous. And now for our last inductee of the evening, our world globe trotter, our Mongolian sheep herder. Please watch this video of Robert Friedland.
Robert Friedland is a man not just with a past in mining, but a man with a keen eye on the future of the industry. He believes it's the next wave of technology that will drive the demand for raw materials.
It's very simple. We have to intuit the problems of the world and how we want the world to change, and how technology has to evolve to get us there.
As an example, in a world full of electric vehicles, there will be a higher demand for copper, and Robert Friedland has shown he's willing to go to the ends of the earth to find it.
We really have to look at this little planet as our hunting ground, because the greatest mine could be anywhere. Our travels have taken us to well over 50 countries around the world, looking for the best.
He's just got a genius for recognizing things that other people might not. He sees around corners a little bit, and when he gets an opportunity, he will take full advantage of it.
Although his degree from Reed College in Portland, Oregon was in political science, Robert's quest for the best started with trees, not minerals. His first business venture was investing in timberland with partner, college pal, Steve Jobs.
We thought trees grow 6 or 7% a year, naturally, and that would be a very good inflation hedge. Turned out to be true.
On one of the timber blocks was an old mine that piqued Robert's interest in mining. In the early 80s, he bought an old silver producer, the Deer Trail Mine in Utah, and sold it to a Canadian stock promoter.
To me, at that time, at a young age, to realize that the stock markets could value a tired old mine like that in the ground so highly was quite a revelation. And that's actually what started it.
There's a few people around that are serial mine finders, and Robert is one of those.
Robert has spearheaded either the discovery, the funding, or building of many major mining projects. One of the first game-changing discoveries, described by some as the find of the century, was a nickel-copper-cobalt deposit at Voisey's Bay, Labrador. It was found by 2 prospectors originally contracted to look for diamonds and base metals by Diamond Fields Resources, a company Robert co-founded.
They were flying back to their home camp at the town of Nain one afternoon, and not having found any diamonds, they saw an interesting rock outcrop. They decided to come back the next day, landed their helicopter on it, and it turned out to be a major copper-nickel discovery in the long run.
Teck Resources made a deal for 11% of the company. Norman says it wasn't long before the major nickel players got involved.
I think he had both Inco and Falconbridge thinking he knew more than they did about it, and he certainly had them jumping over hoops to try to outdo each other.
Inco purchased the Voisey's Bay project for $4.5 billion in 1996. The mine has become the lowest cost nickel producer in the world. In 2006, Vale acquired Inco and built a $4 billion process plant at Long Harbour, Newfoundland, to produce 50,000 tons of nickel metal per year from Voisey's Bay. Between 1996 and 2012, as Executive Chairman, President, and CEO of Ivanhoe Mines, Robert oversaw subsidiary projects in Australia, China, Myanmar, South Korea, and Fiji. He also set his sights on Mongolia.
If you want to find an Easter egg, you can't keep looking where your older brother or sister already looked. You've got to find someplace new. So Mongolia is one of the last great places that had never been explored with modern science.
It took tenacity on his part and faith in a great exploration team to make a major discovery on the Oyu Tolgoi property BHP had given up on.
They found a lot of smoke. They never really discovered the source of the fire. That takes a lot of intestinal fortitude. We nearly went bankrupt doing it. That ore body was discovered on hole number 151. That means that we drilled 150 holes, each of which was a failure. And then 2 years later, I think the 271st hole really and truly turned it into the world-class project it's going to be for the next 100 years.
In 2012, Rio Tinto acquired Ivanhoe Mines, renaming it Turquoise Hill Resources. Oyu Tolgoi is now one of the largest copper and gold mines in the world, producing approximately 200,000 tons of copper and 700,000 ounces of gold each year, with more to come from a huge underground mine being developed.
I think he's demonstrated exploration pays off, and he's been able to, through his own dogged behavior, but also through the people that he's hired, demonstrate excellence in that area. Even though he's not a geologist, he's as good as any geologist out there in terms of his knowledge of geology and understanding what it takes.
Robert continued his faith in the drill bit in Africa with the launch of Ivanplats in 1998 to pursue mineral projects in sub-Saharan Africa. Ivanplats later became Ivanhoe Mines. Robert and his team decided to look beyond the areas most companies explored.
So there are a series of these mines, like pearls on a string, the Copper Belt. And the Copper Belt just ended under a blanket of sand that had blown in from the Kalahari Desert. And we thought, hidden underneath that sand, it would be logical to assume that those pearls on a string would continue.
They were right. Kamoa is the first major discovery in the Central African copper belt in 100 years, and based on resource estimates, is the largest undeveloped copper deposit in the world. Robert is credited with creating business links throughout Asia and the Asia-Pacific region for the past 25 years. He has been a resident of Singapore during that period, where the family-owned Ivanhoe Capital Corporation is based. Robert has raised more than $10 billion on world capital markets for affiliated companies since 1993. Tony says Robert is willing to invest personally in his projects.
He puts his money on the table, and he is personally invested in terms of being involved in all facets of the business. So it just demonstrates the commitment that he has to the companies and the industry.
Robert also uses his success to give back. His resource projects provide community support programs and public health initiatives funded through the Friedland Foundation.
He's been a great ambassador for the Canadian mining industry, and I think we're very fortunate that mining was his chosen profession in terms of what he focused on.
The mining industry will always be here. No matter what we do, we're going to rely on certain raw materials.
As long as there is mining, you can be certain Robert Friedland will be searching the planet one step ahead of the technology that demands those raw materials.
Please, will you join me on the podium, Robert? It gives me great pleasure, Robert, to present this award to you. I've watched your career since I've known you since 1982. It's been one of my privilege. And our industry has never been as exciting as when you're at the center of the action. So with all of that, please accept this award for all of us. And the microphone is yours. There you go.
Well, it's indeed a humbling experience to be here with my Canadian brothers and sisters in mining. I've been told by Pierre that I really shouldn't tell you about what we're up to because I'll be accused of stimulating your hand-to-wallet reflex. So I won't do it. I do want to tell you, however, that what we're doing here is very much like being in the movie business, and this ceremony really resembles a lot the Academy Awards. And we have, in fact, bought a movie studio. John Pinati, would you stand up? John runs Ivanhoe Pictures. We're now in the motion picture business. I want to tell you a little bit about it. You know, the movie that more people saw in China than any other movie was Avatar. And Avatar, you know, it depends what you believe and what you want to see. We're in the mining industry. But in Avatar, James Cameron, the producer, made the miners the bad guys. They're going off in the future to mine unobtainium on a faraway planet. And in order to get it, they nuke these huge trees, disturbing Aboriginal peoples that spend their lives sort of oming and praying, and they really make a mess of it. So that, you know, that Hollywood just couldn't resist making the miners the bad guys. And this kind of thing really irritates us because we have enough arrows in our back for being in the mining industry. I mean, everything you touch is the product of mining. As you all know, we have to grow it or we have to mine it. And so now that we have a few bucks, we decided to get into the mining business. So I really want to tell you what's opening soon at a theater near you, actually on television. Charles Randolph was nominated yesterday for an Academy Award for writing the script called The Big Short. That's in the movie theaters right now. And his partner, Malcolm Gladwell, a well-known Canadian author, have written a script, and I want to give you our pitch. It's about movies now. Okay. Yeah. So we originally were going to call this movie Copper, but it's been renamed Red Rush, red being the red metal and a rush to Mars. And you've seen Matt Damon do a very good job in Martian. If you haven't, I suggest you see it, because we're going there. And so the story is that around the 25th century, the popular ethos of the hippie generation has really achieved the fact that we no longer burn coal on this planet. And we no longer burn crude oil, or any hydrocarbon, in fact, because we have 27 billion people on the planet. We still have the Catholic Church and Islam, so there's plenty of babies by the 25th century. And so we've achieved an all-electric world. We've got electric cars, and we've got three-dimensional holographic imagery coming down on the internet, all wirelessly, which is wildly consumptive of electrical power. And since we've run out of freely available copper, we've gone to Mars in the 26th century. But only about 32,000 hardy souls go to Mars, and they become Martians. And they become, by the 29th century, a lot like the Saudis used to be. They're upstream, have all the wealth, and basically the Earthlings have to buy this copper from Mars. In fact, we're mining it in a very environmentally sensitive way on Mars. There's only about 1/8 of the gravity, 1/7 of the gravity. Huge automated machinery, no human exploitation of labor. And this huge wealth that's accreted up there, I don't want to tell you the whole story. But the miners get their revenge. In the script, they are definitely the good guys. We control the cloud. We control all human information, and we have a monitoring function of all the people on planet Earth. And this is a really fascinating script because Malcolm Gladwell is a really good writer. We put a lot of science into it, and we've just reached an agreement with Legendary Pictures to produce this as a 12-part series, because if you have 12 hours, you can gorge on the television, like Breaking Bad, and it'll be a big fight between Netflix and HBO to market this sort of thing. And Legendary's recently done the new Godzilla movie and Hangover, Hangover 1 and Hangover 2. You remember with the transvestite and the little monkey. They also did Batman and Interstellar. So this is going to be a really serious production opening near you. And the beauty of it is that since we control the script, I can assure you the miners are the good guys. Yeah. So as I'm looking around this room and I'm looking at the list of fellow inductees, just with Ned sitting at that table, the list of people that I've come in contact with in having achieved the age of 65 is just amazing. But just starting with Luigi Niac, Louis and I, with Dave Fennell, were up the Essequibo River together at the Oh My Mine. And I remember Dave Fennell had one of his geologists attacked by about a 10-meter long python. And two stupid geologists in a dugout canoe started whacking a black leopard that was swimming in the river, harassing him with a paddle. And the leopard responded by diving into the canoe. And that ruined their day. And that really happened. And Louis Gignac was running the mine. And so that's quite remarkable. And then Stu Blusson worked with Hugo Dummett. We worked very closely with Hugo Dummett. Hugo always told us that there was going to be a great ore body in Mongolia, and we did find it. That was the ore body has been named the Hugo Dummett deposit, and it's a really magnificent porphyry. So I've had the privilege to hang around with a lot of really great geologists. You know, if you hang around with the Hells Angels, you become a Hells Angel. If you hang around with Hare Krishna devotees, you start chanting like a Hare Krishna devotee. But if you hang around with great geologists, you can learn a lot. So Vic Hollister, Jack McHewitt, Hugo, as I've said, hung around with Luigi, so many. I mean, Ed Flood, who we're just going to be talking to, Charlie Foster, I've seen him, Bill Hayden, who started the whole idea of going to Africa looking for platinum. The list is just endless. And so I give my honor to you and tell you that this is a time in mining where great fortunes are lost, but it's also a time where great fortunes will be made. This is just the beginning of the next cycle. We exhale and we inhale. It's organic, it's normal, and the fish all swim this way in one direction for a long time, then the whole school of fish just turns. Sentiment can turn on a dime, and so there's really a good opportunity to operate now because governments, their demands are sort of ameliorated when metals prices are down. It's easier to talk to governments, and the things that we're trying to do here are to find the raw materials that we need to help the Chinese breathe their air. It's seriously important that the Chinese people be allowed to breathe air. Because after all, about 1.4 billion of them, and they're very cranky about the air quality over there. So we're Canadian people, both Canada and China begin with a C and end with an A. And we're going to help these Chinese breathe their air with copper and with platinum for fuel cells. And we're going to make cars lighter with scandium metal and an alloy with aluminum so that cars are lighter and more fuel efficient. And so if we spend our time thinking about how we can help the world and recognize that we're part of a solution, and we can get Angelina Jolie and Tom Cruise to sort of seduce you and give you that message subliminally, we'll finally get our just revenge before we are, not here in corpus to accept this award. So this is a lot like the award ceremony. People dress like this on Hollywood when they get these awards. And so please give a hand to John Pinatti's team working so hard for Red Rush. When it opens at a theater near you, you're all invited. Now, I also want to mention that Norm Keevil. I didn't know how they got him in the movie, but Norm and I have a lot of time with each other. I remember with my son flying over the treetops at Voisey's Bay. It was incredible when I remember I was with Norm and our stock was trading at about $35, and we needed some money. And $108 million at that time was real money in 1995, and I wanted $43 a share just because it sounded good. And Norm paid me a premium, and his lawyer said, "Norm, you can't pay this guy a premium. This is a private placement." And Norm took the pen and signed it and said, "I'm over 21." And that really happened. And that $108 million investment made Tech about $440 million and paid for a big chunk of Antamina. So we're all somehow connected to each other through an incredibly complex chain of causation. So on behalf of the tens of thousands of people that have worked for the Ivanhoe Group, the people that have climbed over mountains and have gone to the lowest rent countries imaginable, and basically we've been essentially everywhere other than Antarctica. We're banned from Antarctica. We've been basically everywhere. And we're going to announce another discovery in the very near future. And we're doing it for sport, but we're really using the monies that we make that way to convince people through the power of Hollywood that all of you are the good guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Don't forget your award. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you sure, Robert, you don't want to share with just an intimate group here some of the results? No? I understand that Robert is on the quest now for a mineral that's in the table and that's called utopium. Okay. Now, Robert, I do have, as a friend, I have one question. Am I in your will? Well, it's hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we're wrapping up another great year of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame inductions. But before we wind up the formal part of the evening, I want to make sure that you know how this evening is made possible. And it's made possible because of our sponsors. Hecla Mining, our diamond sponsor, Hatch, our dinner wine sponsor, our platinum sponsors, Barrick Gold, Franco-Nevada, Goldcorp, Macri, and SNC Resources. Our gold sponsors, Agnico Eagle, BMO Capital Market, and Tech Resources. And Paradigm Capital for the program printing. Thank you to our head table guests and presenters, to our pianist, Linda Bradford, our singer, Michelle Burns, and our piper, Ian Dewar, and our photographer, Keith Otten. To the members of WAMIC and WIM who act as hostesses for the new inductees, and to the students from the Schulich School of Business who assisted in the registration. Thank you to Merrily Support Services for bookkeeping services, and thank you to Becky Bays, our unflappable Hall of Fame coordinator who oversees everything. And her sidekick, Sarah Mawson, I'm not quite done, the ever-patient reservations coordinator who takes all of the bookings for this event. Thank you to the member and associate member of organization who created and continue to support the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. You have all the logos up there. To the representative who serves on the Hall Board of Directors. And a huge thank you to everyone for coming this evening to honor our inductees and celebrate the importance of the mining industry in Canada. Before you head to the bar or go to the train, while we'd like to leave one more thought with you. This industry employs less than 2% of professional women in the world. Really, guys, I mean, the best we can do is tie with low-fat milk. So please, when you think about hiring, okay, think of, supporting groups like Women Who Rock and Women's in Mining, and that works very hard to attract the support of women in our industry. So that wraps things up, but the evening continues. The bar stays open for half an hour, so please mingle, personally congratulate. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.